Oh my goodness. There's nothing more rewarding than seeing someone create something, a pattern, or just creating someone else's pattern in your fabric. Like, that is like the ultimate for me. If someone tags me and they've made, even if it's not even something that they've created, a pattern that they've created, but somebody else's pattern, but they could see my fabric in that pattern.
Yeah.
It's the biggest honor for me because I'm like, wow, it's so impactful.
You're listening to Fussy Cutters Club podcast, a show that gives you permission to cut into the good fabric so you can make quilts you love. And now your host, who believes it's not a crime to love using novelty fabrics, Ange Wilson.
Hello, Fussy Cutters. Welcome to another episode. Today I have the immense pleasure of sitting down with the bubbly and vivacious and wonderful Jennifer Long of Sew a Story. Jennifer is one of those people that I wish you could have in your sewing room with you because she would be your biggest champion. She is infectious in her positivity and her spirit and her nature, and it just flows through her. If you didn't know from hearing it from her, you would by the end of it. She's an early years educator, and that is the lens that she sees her fabric design through and her patterns, and that she's the kind of person you'd want, quite frankly, looking after your kids between 8 and 3, Monday to Friday. And I'm just so grateful that we got the chance to sit down and talk with her. She is also works for Riley Blake Designs, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the interview as well. So, you know what? Let's just do it. Let's get our chat on. Let's get talking. Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for joining me today.
Hello, Angie. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so honored to be part of your podcast today.
Oh, you say that now, but you wait till it's published. I bring your brand into disrepute.
No, it'll be so fun. We're going to have a good time.
So your brand or your business is called Sew a Story, which I love as a fussy cutter. I'm just so, the thing that I found as we talk to more and more fussy cutters is that for a majority of us, we like to tell a story with our fabric choices. And so when I saw your brand, I was like, oh, Sew a Story. Yes, that's exactly what we do. So can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, how you got into it? Just tell us who you are on our date.
On our date. Sounds lovely. Okay, well, you stop me if I keep going on and on.
No, it's fine.
I'm not sure where you want it to start, but so I'm Jennifer Long. My company is called Sew a Story. The name has come for a number of reasons, but I am an early childhood educator turned Riley Blake Designs fabric designer, and I niche in early years fabric. And so just like you said, Angie, that we all find fabrics that call to us that sew a story. And I was finding myself, as a maker, as a mom, being drawn to fabrics that did tell a story. And so my own artwork is obviously a story to me. And so that is definitely something very strong and the reason why that name came about. But a little bit about my journey is I started sewing really young when my grandmother owned a sewing and knitting shop, and we used to go to her house for the summer. And she always had like a lot of yarns that we would roll up for her. We would take it out and we'd roll it into the ball. But she would make us doll clothes. And so that was my first introduction into crafting or sewing for play. And it was so exciting and interesting to me that you could create something that you could also, that could be fun. Like that part is part of the process is so fun, but then you can also play with it after. And so that has always spoken to my heart. And then sort of to jump forward a few decades, when I had my first kids, we have 4, they're adults and teens now. But when we had our first children and they were young, I really wanted all of them, but I really wanted them to have something special. I felt the strong need to create for them. So I made quilts for them. I was heavily into the quilting industry and ghost pattern writing. So I was making quilts for my children, but I also wanted to create toys for them. And the most amazing thing happened. I really found that as my children were either watching me part of the process or seeing what was happening, even if they didn't know I made it, they could tell that it was handmade. And they treated those toys so differently, those dolls and blankets and everything else differently than the rest of their hundreds of toys that they had. And it set off a fire inside of me that really pivoted my direction for my work life and just who I am as a person, that I really wanted to have an impact on children and families through play. Like as an early childhood educator, we know that like play is the best way to learn. And I just couldn't believe that I could see firsthand in my own children and then other children that I started making items for, that this was really impactful. So it had a huge pivot for me to become that.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So it's so fun. So it's kind of interesting to see how like the directions you take in life kind of bring you to where you are.
Yep.
So just to go back, I know I'm hopping back and forth over the timeline here, but just to go back, when I was still in school age myself, I was training to be a professional ballet dancer at the time. And I know. And so that has actually had a huge impact on my design career, just because I had a lot of, I guess, visual understanding of like the human anatomy and body and just aesthetics. And so if anyone knows a little bit about me, they know that I'm a professional doll designer and maker. And so that's had a big impact on me that way, in a very positive way, because I wanted the dolls that I designed to be like a healthy body image doll and, just have good proportions. And just, sometimes you can see dolls on the market that are just not realistic to what humans are. And I just wanted these dolls to be just something that could, I don't know, almost rise above that aspect of it for me. But the interesting thing about dance and working so hard at that career was, after we worked so hard, you always had a performance like throughout the year. You had the Nutcracker, you had all these different things, and you would get to go on the third floor of this big ballet company, and they would have a costume room there. It had about 50 sewists, like 50 sewists in there, and they had boning and tulle, and they had like a shoe room where they like dyed the shoes a different color. It was so amazing, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is where I need to be. It's so funny. It had such a big impact on me. And so I thought, well, I knew my career was going to be short as a dancer. So this is what I was going to do afterwards.
Wow.
And I just didn't really know the direction, how I could make money at that still. So I did do my early childhood education after I finished, because I was like, I got to be practical here.
Yeah. Yes. Practicality comes in every so often. But
I know.
But that is such an amazing story and a journey. You're right. Life, like if I had told, there is no way if I went back and told my high school self what I would be doing today, that they'd be like, yeah, sure, I see that. No worries. And so I sort of think, and even when I wrote my first book, I was like, I should dedicate this to my home economics teacher, because I failed home economics. And she was like, you should never, ever touch a sewing machine. You are bad. Like, don't. No. And I thought, now here I am teaching other people to sew.
Yes. Oh, that's actually what makes you an excellent teacher, when you have to overcome those hurdles yourself. If it comes naturally and easy to you, then it's harder to teach. It's when you've actually done through all those trials and errors that makes you the good teacher.
Yeah. Wow. My biggest problem is when I get into a fabric store, I'm like a bull in a china shop. I'm very impatient and I want to use all the stuff, and I want to see, I go like, my husband often says to me, why do you bother going to classes, like other people's classes? And I'm like, I know I'm going there to try and learn the technique that the teacher is teaching, but a big part of it is I just want to see what everyone else is making. And I get so excited and I'm like, look what you did. Oh, that's amazing.
Isn't that what Instagram is all based around anyways? Seeing what other people are making?
I know. And we'll be right back. Are you looking for a safe space to express who you are as a fabricaholic? Look, that seems funny and it's all weird and it's right for me to say that. But let's face it, if you're listening to this podcast, there's a fair chance that you have quite a substantial fabric collection and that you pay attention to what fabrics are being released, that you like being creative, that you make time for patchwork, and that you look for friends who share a similar outlook on life and a similar appreciation for creativity and sewing and fabric collection and what the latest designers are doing. Look, if that's you, the good news is I've started a safe place for all of us to get together. It's all about having a place where you can come, share your creativity, share your favorite fabrics. We're not going to be quilt police. We don't care if your favorite fabric is a fabric that's covered with rubber ducks. Bring it, sister. That's what we want to see. So if you're looking for like-minded people, why not check out Society Gnome? You can find all the details at gnomeangel.com. We look forward to welcoming you to the group. And now, on with the chat. I want to circle back to something that you said about learning, because I think in this day and age, there's such a pressure to be perfect, to get everything right first go. And you said that in early childhood, we all know that learning through play is the best way to learn. And that's the thing that I try and tell people when it comes to fabric selection and fussy cutting and learning a new technique or anything. It's the play that makes it valuable. It's not, if you rolled out of bed and got it right first go, you'd be like, okay, I got that. No worries. But if you roll out of bed and it doesn't quite land the first time, you have to think about why didn't it work? What happened here? What should I do differently? And so I think a lot of times that play and that fun is taken out of the process for people because they've got to get the right color palette. And I know we just said Instagram's a good thing, but I think in some ways it's because of Instagram and social media that there's this pressure to go, I made this and it's perfect. Whereas I think the biggest things in life are when you make something and it doesn't land the way you thought it would, or the colors are slightly off. Or do you find that in your experience as well as a fabric designer? And are there things that you've done differently between your first line and your line now, or your first toys and the toys now?
Well, so tremendously. I think because, I mean, there's so many reasons. So number one, we absolutely learn through doing and through playing. So, if my husband was to give me directions somewhere, I still might not be able to know how to get to that place until I actually drove it one or two times, and then I would know, right? So I actually learned it from doing it. And it's the same thing with everything. So the more you practice, the more you refine your skills. So the more that you sew, or the more that you draw, or the more that you speak in public, or the more that you write quilt patterns, the more that you do any one of those things, the better you get at it. And the more you find your voice in it too. And I love what you're saying, Angie, about not being scared, because not everyone, we write quilt patterns for, and I write my quilt patterns for my fabric collection. So I want people to use my fabric collections in the patterns, obviously. So it's not even just going that they have to choose the right fabric or the wrong fabric, or worrying about that, but just being free, like you said, enough to even just think, oh, I can do this in chain piecing. I did one block and I know there's 6 more to go. I can probably chain piece the next 6. Yeah. So I understand how to do one, and then the more experience you get, or if you like to do one at a time, I mean, it's all okay. There's no right or wrong when it comes to being creative. And that's really what we are doing, is being creative. Even when we're just making the end product, that is completely creative, it's fantastic. So to answer your question, sorry, I got a little off topic there, but to answer your question, absolutely. My fabric design has grown. My doll making skills have grown, every part, my pattern writing skills have grown, and different people and companies and experiences have influenced that, which is so beautiful. So every connection that you make along your own personal journey, like adds another element to you as a person, which therefore comes out in other ways. And so I think it's so beautiful to like not only look forward at what you want to achieve, but look back at how far you've come. Yeah. And so, yeah, I love that about this industry.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I get, I don't know whether disheartened is the right word for it, but we'll go with it. Like when people start with QuiltCon rejects, where they put their quilts in, it's a juried selection. So it's going to be biased to what the jury wants to see. And so they put them in and then they don't get selected. And they think that is a comment on their worth as a creator, that because it didn't get into a show, what they've made isn't worthwhile. And I want to just kind of shake them and go, no, everything you make is you. It's a little bit of you. And as a person who gets to view that little bit of you, I get to learn a little bit about you and I get to see the world the way you see the world. And I get to appreciate the you that is now. And so I kind of go like, if entering shows is great, like, and I've done it and I get really super competitive when we do it. And I know that about myself and all of those sorts of things. But I never kind of try to lose sight of the fact that just because that quilt doesn't win or it doesn't get selected or that it doesn't devalue who I am and what I've done. And it's the same with posting to social media. If you post something to social media and it doesn't get the likes and the comments, and that doesn't mean that it's not valuable, and it doesn't mean that it's not worthy of praise or love, or it's just, I want people to share because I want to see who they are and I want to learn a little bit more about them. And so I 100% agree. It is every little connection we make peppers what we do then from that point on with our creativity. And so it's one of the things that I love about our industry is that connectivity between people and the way that we can influence and inspire and even if people aren't, because a lot of times people are like, I'm not a professional. And I'm like, I know, that's the beauty of it. You're not a professional. So you're just having fun with no pressure. And it's just, and I'm like, you guys are making the amazing stuff. And it's that we can appreciate everyone.
Yeah. There's nothing better than seeing, oh my goodness, there's nothing more rewarding than seeing someone create something, a pattern, or just creating someone else's pattern in your fabric. Like, you know, that is like the ultimate for me. If someone tags me and they've made, even if it's not even something that they've created, a pattern that they've created, but somebody else's pattern, but they could see my fabric in that pattern.
Yeah.
It's the biggest honor for me because I'm like, wow, it's so impactful. But a really neat like story, I think, to talk about what you're saying is like my journey to becoming a fabric designer with Riley Blake Designs. I actually was a ghost pattern writer when my children were little for decades.
Yep.
And when my youngest one went to school and he was already in school for a couple of years, I thought, I think I have something to offer and I want to see if I can make it for a fabric company and I be a fabric designer. And I had made a portfolio that I was going to submit. I showed it to some of my friends in the industry and they thought it was great, gave me feedback. And they were like, which companies are you going to submit it to? And I said, oh, I'm only submitting it to Riley Blake Designs. And they said, oh, okay. So I submitted to Riley Blake Designs and I waited and waited and waited. And I got a reply back and it said, no, thank you.
Yep.
And of course it's crushing, but like that is a pivotal moment as well. So at that point, the people around me, because I had invested a year of my time into this, were like, oh, well, take it to another company then. Go see if you, and I was like, no, I had my heart on Riley Blake. I saw myself as a Riley Blake fabric designer. Yeah. So I after I got over the emotion of it, I sat down and looked with like a more analytical eye. And I was like, okay, how can I improve this? They didn't give me any feedback on why not, or yes or no. I just had to take it from myself. Like, is there something that I would change? And when I started looking at it, I was like, yeah, I think I could change it. So I took another year and I submitted it again to Riley Blake Designs, different, but way better. And it was ready. It was ready. And they said, absolutely, yes, welcome to the team. So it just shows you that just because someone says yes or no, it doesn't mean no forever. It
Yep.
just means like not right now. And maybe you could look at, maybe this doesn't fit with what they needed. Like maybe there was another early years designer, doesn't even have anything to do with me. Who knows, right?
Yep. And I love that you were like, no, I want to be Riley Blake. And I don't think, because I have the pleasure of knowing a few different fabric designers, I don't think it is, you have to know which. I think there is some people, they pitch to everybody and they end up where they end up, and that's great for them. And then I think there's definitely some designers who go, no, that's the fabric house I want to work with. And so that's what they go for. And I think I love that you call yourself an early childhood designer, because I think most people go, oh, you do novelty fabric? And you're like, no, I don't. Not really.
They're very different. Yes. Because I don't think my fabric is only for children. I just think it's like available for children so that they can learn from it. But it's like whimsical enough that I would have this in my living room, but there's enough detail and like fun in it that it's like family friendly.
Yep. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
I kind of go, so I find myself attracted to illustrators in fabric design. So people who are telling a story through their images on their fabric, that there are characters in their fabric designs, because as a fussy cutter, they're the things that I want to use to tell my creative journey in patchwork. And so oftentimes I find especially really early on when I started and I was more susceptible to what I thought other people thought of my work, that they would go, oh, you work with novelty fabric? And I'd be like, oh, no, is that bad? Oh, sorry. And now I'm like, yeah, man, I work with novelty fabric and I put it on adult beds and I put it in adult stuff and we do.
Oh, I love you so much. Me too. I do too.
And I think
1,000%.
Some of the most beautiful quilts I've seen are people who've taken what would be considered childish fabric or fabric for kids only and made something really elevated out of it. And I hate saying elevated because that again implies that there's some distance between. It's just a sideways move, not
so well said.
Up
so
and
well
down.
said. Yes.
And they've taken it and they've used like a controlled color palette to really kind of pick out the motifs in it, and they've given it this kind of new, I hate saying it even, I don't know how to, I want to say like sophisticated or grown up, but that implies an unsophistication, or it's just different. Kids require different things to what an adult will find engaging in some instances. And so I'm like, you should be going into a fabric store and seeing the possibilities in every bolt. Don't just like put it aside because you go, oh, that's a kid's fabric.
Yeah, I love this. I love this topic. It's like my heart story. I love it because I think that you're right. What people think is children's or kids' fabric, what it used to be, is certainly not what I am trying to make it. Like that's why I'm calling it early years fabric or early years design, is because as an educator, I don't go down. I don't talk down to children. I think you can pull them up. Like children will behave to with the ceiling you put on them. So like they will elevate to what your expectations of them are. So if you expect them to run around and scream in your church, then they will run around and scream in your church. If you expect them to sit nicely and quietly for the whole hour, giving them the tools to do that, then they will rise to the occasion.
Yep.
You know, and so I think it's the same thing like in our designs and our fabrics. The spectrum for children can be so much bigger than what we thought it could be, decades ago, right? Yep. And that kids will respond to a pastel color palette. Kids will respond to more sophisticated illustrations of stories that they love. They will respond to great art. These are all things that, I think that are just so wonderful that we have the opportunity to like shape this industry through. And then same thing with your quilt patterns, like that children and adults, like you said, will respond to quilt patterns that are whimsical and that can kind of go through all the generations. I love that. Yeah. That's so good.
And I find, because I use everything in my quilts. And I find that one of the greatest joys is, and especially you see it more when they're hanging in a quilt show because you've got no control over who's coming past them. Whereas if in the house, you've got, you know, like your family and stuff, and they're bound by family love to tell you that it's amazing. But in a quilt show, if you stand back and you watch the people that come past it, and I find with my work, little kids can pick out stuff that they love, and then adults come past and they pick out stuff that they, oh, look, remember that from our childhood? Oh, remember that? That's that. And so you get this kind of generational thing where it's like, you know,
if you can't see right now, I'm hugging Angie. If you can't see, I love her. Yes.
But it is that thing of, and so I find when I do because I'm very scrappy, I use everything and anything. I try and tell a story in my blocks, and then I find that those groupings of motifs or themes then resonate with the entire age spectrum. And so it makes, I find, like we've had quilts that have come in first place that are now covered in chocolate and pet stains, and because you make them to be accessible to everybody. And the thing that the kids love about them, that they can make forts out of them and they can drag them around, and they every so often they'll find, you know, a Minecraft character or Star Wars. But my husband gets excited when he sees Star Wars in there and stuff like that. And you think, it's the thing that I love most about the quilts is I know that if I was to pass away, I mean, I will, when I pass away, if my kid takes my quilts and gives them to his kid, there's going to be things that he'll be able to go, oh, this was from my childhood, or this made me really happy. And then the kid will be able to find stuff that goes, oh, this is from my childhood and this makes me happy. And so.
And they're sharing your story that you sewed together.
Yeah.
So,
And so I kind of go, I find it really frustrating when you go to people, oh, you're just a quilter. And you're like, no, you're making memories and you're making heirlooms and you're making connections for people. And it's a really special gift that you've been given to be able to create these things and share these things. And then you as a fabric designer get another little element in that where you get to inspire and let them use your images and your fabrics in their story to tell what they want to do. And then as a quilt pattern designer, you give them the framework. I like to think of quilt patterns as like coloring books for fabric that they get to pick.
I love that. I love that. Yes.
What goes everywhere. And so, yeah, it's just really, I know this sounds really naff and people look at me really funny, but I get really excited by just how amazing the gift is that we've all been given. And so
I agree so much. I always think that even on the hard days, we were talking about that a little bit before this started, even on the hard days, I make a mental note to say, well, I say thankful and blessed. It's right up there on my wall, always thankful and blessed, because it is a gift to be able to work in any capacity in this wonderful industry. And I'm so grateful for it, to be able to share what's in our hearts. And you're right about being like true to yourself. And I think what resonates with people is that you talked about Instagram maybe being like a little bit of a wall. And I think it was that. I think it's starting to come down a little bit on some people where it's a little bit more real. But I think people are smart, just like, children are smarter than we give them credit for. I think people are smarter than we give them credit for. And they can see when someone's being authentic. I think they can see that this is this person, and that actually endears them more to it. You're like, oh, I know the whole story behind this collection, or I know the whole story behind this pattern, or how this came about, and I can feel it and I resonate with it. And it's truly impactful then, that like the kind of work we do, because then it kind of, creativity begets creativity. So you kind of pass that authenticity on, opposed to, being like your real self. Yeah, for sure. I love it.
Well, I struggled over the years, especially in the last few years, with whether being a quilt pattern designer or working in this industry was was, I know this will sound really horrible, but a valid choice. Like, I should get a real job, go back to my real job, work in IT, do something professional and all, like a grow up kind of thing. And then as a Christian, and I know everyone has different faiths and different beliefs, but one of the things that I often remind myself is that in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, when they build the tabernacle, God gives the artisans special skill sets to be able to make the temple curtains and the priest clothes and the decorations and the things used at the altar and all of those sorts of things, because he values artists and he is a creator and they're important. And I often think to myself, man, it would be so amazing to have been on the team that made the tabernacle curtains and all the embroidery and all.
Well, isn't it? I know it's how our whole families and really environments are pulled together. Like, even, like your relationships and everything, you pull together people that complement each other. Not everybody has the same skills, because everybody does have a special set of gifts that they were given. And like, what an honor it is to be able to use our gifts, right? And to be able to share them. And everyone has a different set of gifts, and no one gift is better than the other. They're all needed. Every gift is needed.
And that's the thing. And so I came back to this thing where I was like, no, through my work, I help other people connect with the things that bring them joy, and they can make things for their families and the ones that they love. And because there's nothing better than giving a quilt to someone who's in hospice or going through a difficult time, or, have lost a child, or that quilt is a physical hug that person can have at any time, and you don't have to be there for it. And so, and then, you give quilts in times of celebration, weddings, birthdays, milestones. And so
I think they mean,
they just become these markers. Yeah.
They end up meaning so much, because like I was saying with my own kids, when I was making those dolls for them, that they could feel how much love that was put into creating this, quilt or doll or clothing or whatever item you are making, like dinner that you're preparing, supper, like anything else that you are preparing, they can actually like experience, that gift of yours. It's a way to sort of pass it through the next person. It is really, truly a fun opportunity to be able to share that.
Yes. And I should say, it doesn't negate the fact that there is work. We were talking about this earlier. Someone has to do the books. It's not me. I'm very fortunate. No. It's not me. But I do have to think about them, and the taxes and the superannuation and all of that sort of stuff. If you weren't in the quilt industry, I guess the answer is you'd probably be an early childhood educator. But is there something that you kind of go, if I could do any job in the world, this is what I would do? Or are you doing it?
I am living it. I am living the dream. I really feel like it. I feel like, I feel like all of the paths in my life have sort of brought me to here. And I want your listeners to like understand that it's not that one day I was like surprised and this fell on my lap.
Yeah.
It was decades of going on a pathway all the way. And that pathway wasn't exactly here where I am, but it was like going all the way on that pathway as far as I could take it, and then pivoting and taking the next pathway in the next direction. And so I feel like all that I've created, like all that I am here, like I've had a hand in it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've put all my skills, I've brought my skills together and was able to do that in a way that really not only like fulfills me as a person, but I feel like makes a valuable impact on this industry too, which I really love.
Yeah. So
I love this industry for sure. So I also work full time for my favorite company now. So in the last couple of years, I manage the pattern department at Riley Blake Designs. So that is a dream job, really. Like, like you said about asking your younger self if you could be here. I don't think my younger self, I think this goes for everybody. I don't think our younger selves would be here if we knew all the things we had to do to get here.
Oh, really? Because we've had this conversation. So my parents ran their own business for like 40-something years, right? And now I run a business, apparently. And and so we were talking the other day about a friend of the family's is thinking about going into business for himself. And my mum and I were sitting on the veranda in the afternoon having a chat. And she said, do you think you'd go into business again if you knew everything you knew now? And I was like, whoa. You know what? I think I would in a heartbeat, but I do things differently based on the experience and the learnings that I've had now. You'd obviously do things.
I think you're right. I think I maybe said that I would absolutely want to be here, but knowing all of the hurdles and pain and different things that have come up there, wouldn't want to know that.
Yes,
was happening, and that's what I mean.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
Like, I wouldn't want to stand back at my earlier self and say, you can get there if you do all of this, because all of this is too overwhelming.
Yeah.
But if you just told me, yes, I would, oh my goodness, I would still follow the same path.
Yeah, but
I would still follow the same path to be here.
We were talking about it and I was like, oh, I would do things differently. But then if you do things differently, your own...
Would it be the same person?
Well, no, and it brings with it its own challenges. And so I sort of go, I think if you started on a path, I think the blind enthusiasm and the naivety is the thing that carries you through that path, because as humans, we tend to get so overwhelmed with the negative. Oh, if we do this, I'm going to hurt. There's going to be tears. There's going to be disappointment. There's going to be, so I'll protect myself. It's that thing of I don't want to be open to that. And I think that's fair enough. And I will run a mile to avoid a difficult situation or pain or anything like that. But I think it is those things we forget. Like if you were at the start and you went, yeah, but you know what? You're going to meet X person and you're going to get the thrill of seeing your fabric in a shop for the first time. And you're going to get the thrill of seeing your patterns published for the first time. And you're going to get the thrill of meeting people in classes who just have such a wonderful outlook on the world. And so we don't think about the good things that come with that path. And so I was like, yeah, I would totally do it again. And it would be different, but I would hope that I would still end up in the same outlook, if that makes sense, the same mentality.
Okay, so I don't actually think I would do it differently. I think I would do all the same things as I would have the same knowledge. I feel like my old self made good choices, like, you know, all along the way. But the interesting thing is that I always think, or I really feel, I strongly, like I teach my children this too, that all of the growth happens in the hardest places. Yeah. So like we talked about before, like you wouldn't be a great teacher if it just came easily to you. But beyond that is, you know, I wouldn't be doing my business in the way that I am if I didn't fail at it 5 times first and had to experience that. I wouldn't be approaching fabric design in the way that I do now if the first collection that I submitted got accepted right then. You know, it's in those hard times that we grow. And so I know we like try to avoid those hard times, but that's actually where like the gold is. And, you know, if it's hard to imagine that in the creative space, think about it like in your own health, or like think about it in working out, for example. Like when you are like lifting weights, it's not like the first weight that you lift will build the muscle, but it's when you like lift the weight until your muscle's fatiguing and it's screaming and it's sore the next day. That's when you start to build that muscle. And so that's when we like, that's the uncomfortable area that we always want to try to push to be in. It's such a weird thing, but I think people that are really successful find out a way to be comfortable in that uncomfortable space. That uncomfortable circumference. If you're not comfortable in that uncomfortable circumference, then you don't grow.
Yeah. And it's, I'm so glad you used an analogy that I could relate to, exercise.
You're so welcome. Yes.
But I was chuckling because I have in my book, I did like a fussy cutter's manifesto, like all the things that I think as a fussy cutter you need to embrace and you should remember. And when you were talking, one of my favorites on here is you're going to make mistakes. Mistakes are often where the gold is hidden.
Oh, yes.
Like,
yes, it is. Not often. It absolutely is where it's hidden.
And so
yes.
I kind of think, if I did it again, I'd do things differently. But for me, I had no concept of what a business was or is. And so I turned something that I love to do, and I seemed to get a little bit of traction from an audience with it, that I could turn it into making money. And I was like, oh, I could do this full time. No worries. And so I had no concept of how to set up a business or what a business required or how to be responsible with cash flow and things like that. And those really hurt for a long time because I had no understanding. And I still really don't. I'm a lot better now than I was previously, but we could be in a much better position financially if I had spent the education on learning about being in business. And I think when people are like, oh, what advice would you give someone who wants to enter the industry? I'd be like, do it. It's amazing. You'll have the best time. You'll meet the most amazingly generous and kind people and talented people. But invest in understanding that it is a business and how that business works. Because if you take your eyes off the fact that it is a business and you're supposed to be making money in this because you've got bills to pay, kids to support, things to do, responsibilities, it will eat you up and spit you out because you will put all of your time and energy into it and you will give it everything of you, and you won't have set it up in such a way that is growing and building. And so I see a high churn rate of people, wanting to become pattern designers and thinking that they can support their family off it and everything like that, but they don't have those fundamental business skills. And so, because it is a business.
Well, it is, yeah. It takes, just like anything, I mean, this is like kind of getting a little off topic, but just like anything, it takes a journey to be proficient. So, I think it's okay to part of your journey to be an extension of your hobby. So, we are in a hobby business like this. That is what this business is a hobby business. We can be extremely profitable in this business, but you have to be good at it before you can be extremely profitable at it. So you've had to have started it as a hobby. Like if you start it as a business, then you don't necessarily have all the skills unless you bring the right people into your circle, right? Yep. So if you are starting it and you want it all to come from you, at some point it had to start as a hobby. And then I think it's okay. It just, you have to be honest with yourself of like expectations of what you wanted it to be, there's no harm in being, I started out being a pattern tester for designers when my kids were young, getting paid nothing to do it. And that actually was one of the best educations because I was touching industry leading quilt patterns from major fabric designers as a tester. And I was able to give feedback to them of how to make their patterns better. Now, wasn't getting paid to do it. I wasn't getting a lot of kickbacks on social media at the time or anything like that. But what I was getting was making amazing connections with leaders in the industry that were like, hey, who is this Jennifer Long? Yeah. And what kind of feedback is she giving me? It seems like she knows what she's talking about, and it would just grow. And so, that's not quantifiable necessarily, right? So that it's kind of it's not always like a black and white kind of in this industry. It's not like you go to college for 4 years and then you're able to run this kind of a job. It's very, very different. Yeah.
But I think that's the excitement of it and the beauty of it. Every path, every person's experience and journey is completely different. And
it's so good.
There is no way of doing it. And it's like sewing, right? To me, personally, I think the only thing that you have to pay attention to in quilting is a 1/4-inch seam. Everything else is up for debate. And really, the 1/4-inch seam is only so that mathematically your pieces will fit together and that your fabric doesn't fray and the seams come apart and stuff like that. That's it. If you want to cut it on the bias, cut it on the bias. But you've got to live with the consequences of cutting it on the bias. So you've got to have the skill set to compensate for the fact that you've cut it on the bias. But you can.
Yes.
And if you want to put novelty, I'm saying inverted commas, novelty fabric with grown-up
Early
fabric.
years education fabric.
Yeah,
Yes.
with grown-up fabric, you can. If you want to just work in early years fabric, you can. Like, there is no, you have to do it this way to get to this point.
Love that.
And we'll be right back. If you're like me, you love quilting. You love fabric, you love patchwork, you love everything to do about it. When you're not doing something for work related or family related, or you've got free time on your hands, what you're thinking about is quilting. Quilting, 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 fabric, 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 patchwork, patchwork, patchwork. That's all it is. If this is you, then I have the challenge for you. 100 days, 100 blocks. It's a simple challenge. I ask you to sew one patchwork block a day for 100 days. If you're interested in sewing along with me for 100 days as we make a 100 block sampler quilt, then check out all the information at gnomeangel.com. Click the link in our bio and description for more. And I can't wait to see you there and to sew along with you. And now, on with the chat. I just want to quickly ask you about your work with Riley Blake, because I am fascinated that you have at your fingertips the library of patterns that you can just go through and see what everyone's. And so your experience as a tester and giving that feedback, and I assume that the skills that you learned as becoming qualified as an early learning educator means that you look at patterns from a point of view as how's this person going to learn from this? Have they gotten everything they need from this pattern to be able to successfully complete this project? Is the information laid out in a way that they can easily understand? Do you cover visual learners and people who read as opposed to just look at the diagrams, all of those sorts of things? Can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do in that role, or like
it's
talk to me, baby, about Riley Blake.
It is just so wonderful. So I got obsessed, and I think that's part of the excitement and the beauty. And then also just part of a personality thing is that I got obsessed with quilt patterns 20 plus years ago. And I stopped reading books and I had stacks of patterns, any pattern I could get on my hands, from magazines, from designers. That's why I wanted to be a tester. I was like hungry for patterns. And I went back into like thrift stores and bought old magazines and old pattern books, and just anything I could get from somebody, I would just read. And I would literally read pattern books cover to cover at night. And while I was doing it, it's just, I think partly how I'm wired is that I'm always like, I never follow patterns, even though I read them. I always like wanted to make it my own. I think that's part of being like such a huge creative, right? Yep. So when I would be reading these books, I would be like sucking in all of this information for half rectangle triangles, for all of this, of how are these different doing it. And then I started continuing to read all of these patterns and being like, I wouldn't have done it that way. They're making this more complicated than they need to be. Oh, if they were going to save fabric, I think they should have done it this way. Yep. Then I was starting to like be analytical on my own reading style, which I think is like just naturally the next step that happened. Yep. And then so sort of through all these connections of testers, I started like, oh, if you can see all these things in my patterns, can you like write my pattern for me? And so I was like, sure, I can write your pattern for you. So that sort of kind of builds from there and there until eventually like anything that you do long enough and immerse yourself enough, you start to become like an expert in. Yep. Not that I'm calling myself an expert or anything, but I've just been in, just the more that you're surrounded, I'm blessed enough to have like seen more and more and more. And then within this job, I mean, it's like a dream come true because you get to work. I mean, Riley Blake has 100 designers. We get to work with new patterns and new fabrics all of the time. We're trying to come up with innovative ways to communicate, to like not only communicate instructions, but communicate illustrations and layouts and diagrams, and then translate that into like how to communicate that into video form. And so it's really just, yeah, it's like a constantly evolving industry. And because there are so many creatives in this industry, I do not see it's like learn what 2 + 2 is, and it's always 4. I see this industry. I mean, I've seen it in the last 20 years. People used to just take pictures of their step outs and then write a lot of directions for them. And then they would take pictures and then they could figure out how to put a digital arrow on top of it. And so like that, like I've seen that progression happen where now if you don't have fully illustrated instructions, like, then it's like, oh, is this a dated pattern?
Yeah.
You start to think that, right? And so it becomes industry standard. So it's pretty, it's pretty exciting to be with a company that I firmly stand behind and believe in, and hopefully helping shape the industry in a way that way.
And they're
Super
really
cool.
blessed to have a person who geeks out over patterns as they found the perfect person to do that job that they needed to have done.
Aww,
and so it's but I'm the same. I really love seeing how other creatives instruct other people to replicate what they've done. Because there is, we have a library of steps to where we just go, this is how you make a HST, this is how you make a flying geese, and so each pattern we go, put it in, and then try and make sure that it caters for someone who wants to read, and it caters for someone who just wants to look, and then it caters for the person who wants both of them together, so that you can optimize the learning styles of people who come across your patterns. And so I think there is an art form to a great pattern.
Yes.
It's one of those things that I kind of go, I think when people are like, oh, I want to become a pattern designer. And I'm like, well, you need to go read a lot of patterns, like jump on Etsy, buy some patterns, go to the library, read pattern books, go and see how other people do it, and then go and make patterns, like sew the patterns. And
so many too. Yes. Well, I mean, I always say to myself and our team and just in my business, my team and my business, like I have no ego. I really try to have absolutely no ego, because I feel like when anybody gets an ego, then it's not about the product anymore. It becomes about the person. Yeah. And if we want the best product, then more eyes and more team is always better.
Yeah.
So, even with fabric design is that, I have this vision and I create this fabric and I submit it to the company, and I get feedback from the company saying like, oh, we think you need to change your blue, or think you need to do these tweaks. And at first, if you take it personally, you're like, oh no, I'm married to these. But when you are like open to this collaborative, loving industry, then everything gets elevated. Everything gets elevated when you're open to that. So I think that is my biggest, if you want to like be super successful in this industry, is to like check your ego at the door in a way, because no matter where you are, there's always something more to learn.
Yeah.
And and always something better that can be like, even this is your best, then somebody else adding to it is just going to make it better. It's just going to make it even better than the best. So why wouldn't you? I know.
And even if you're a hobbyist, like if this is your escape and you come in here to create and to do stuff, and I think it's by sharing it with other people and connecting with other creatives, and that you learn more and you grow more. And I think there are some great artists who claim that they create in isolation, but when you sit down and analyze their lifestyle and what they do, their art is definitely influenced by the people in their circle, and they have people that they aspire to and use as inspiration, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think sometimes they're like, you've got to be 100% original. And you're like, nothing is 100% original when it comes to creativity. We all build on the shoulders of those that have gone before us, and hopefully we inspire other people to do the same thing. And that's the mantra that I try and keep with everything we do in the business is, I want more people in. I want I want this
I
addiction to go out and just go, look what you can do with fabric. Look what you can do with the quilt pattern. Look what you can do, and to get excited about it and to keep them coming in, because I think the industry dies, for one thing, if we don't bring more people in. But I'm also if you're eating, this is my analogy, which you probably will.
Not the exercise one, no. Okay.
If you're eating the best chocolate cake, you want to share it with more people so that they can appreciate what the best chocolate cake is, right? So that's where the joy comes from, is where you go, oh, this is the best chocolate cake. You don't eat the whole cake by yourself. You give it to somebody else and you go, is this not the best chocolate cake you've ever had?
I know. Yes. Oh, you're so right. I get it too. I love chocolate cake.
And I think like fabric and the quilting industry is the same. I know when people release, when fabric releases come out in that cycle, there are people in my circle who I will send photos to and go, did you see this? Did you see what this person just released? Oh, I need to add this. Did you see this?
Yes.
And you get that same kind of excitement and thrill of, look what we get to play with. This person has created this so that we can go and play with it. Wait till they see what I'm going to do with this piece of fabric. Like, it just...
Well, and then that's the passed on inspiration, right? Like, it's just this interconnectedness that we were talking about before. It's like full circle our conversation, right? Because this person's creativity, gets passed on, and then the next person becomes creative with that, and the next person becomes creative with that, and it inspires them. Oh, they made a fussy cut quilt with that. Now I can see that fabric in this different way that I didn't see it before, and then they can use it in that way too. I love it. Yeah.
It's just it is such a joy to be given this gift, and I think I'm so fortunate to have been given this gift and to be able to connect with other people. And like, when people are like, why did you start the podcast? And I'm like, really selfishly, I just wanted to talk to other people who loved fabric.
It's so fun. I know. It is really good.
Sorry. You want you mean other people are listening to this? I thought it was just me.
I just wanted to listen to this over and over again.
Because it's that thing of, creativity begets creativity. And so, like, I will go from this conversation today, because my day is starting, whereas yours is kind of waning, and I will play with fabric, and I will be thinking about the things we've talked about today, and I'll be like, okay, well, this is, and that's what this is, and this is. And then when I pick up a Riley Blake pattern, I will think, oh, Jennifer had a touch in this, and like, all of those things, we are really connected. And I think so much of our current society makes us think that we are independent individuals. Yeah. And that is so far from the truth. We are so dependent on each other and so connected to each other. And I think we should lean into that.
What a beautiful way to look at it. What a beautiful way. That's a beautiful way.
I would like to think it's my own, but it's not. I mean, that is...
But you're inspired. See, everyone's inspired by somebody else.
It's an amazing thing. And so I've got to wrap it up because I could talk to you all day. But thank you so much for giving of your time today. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. I look forward to seeing what else you make and create. And you have... For people who are interested, you are running sew-alongs, and you have patterns out, and we didn't even touch on like the embroidered dolls or...
Oh, you'll have to have me back on the podcast another time to talk about that. There you go.
And panels, like you do panel work and all the information you've got on how to play with kids through what you create and stuff like that. It's just amazing. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for your time, and I look forward to seeing you and talking to you again soon.
Thank you. If I may just say, if that's okay before we leave. Yeah. So if anyone's interested in connecting with me, you can do that at sewastory.com. So that's where everything is. Like, everything goes through Sew a Story. And if you are really interested in modern ragdoll making, especially if it's in machine embroidery, like inside the hoop, I have a special membership just for that. It's open a couple times a year, and that's just called modernragdoll.com.
Yeah.
So I hope to see you guys and connect with you there.
It'll be great. So we're going to put all the we're going to put all the links no one can see me, but I'm gesturing to the bottom of the screen. We're going to put all the links in the show notes so people can go and find your website and your Instagram and join your membership and all of those sorts of things. So go.
It was a pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Fussy Cutters podcast. Enjoyed listening? Why not subscribe so you'll never miss an episode? Did you know the quickest way to the heart of any podcaster is to leave a review or recommend the podcast to a friend? It's true, it is. Until next week, get out there and fondle that fabric.